All right. I think it's that time. Welcome back. This is week 3. I'm your professor, Dr. Sean Clavell. This is Anatomy and Physiology. And this is my announcements and review for my online and in-person classes. Welcome. So let me just start by maybe bringing up your canvas here, going over maybe even the schedule here, take a look at what we're looking at, and ultimately review some of the topics that we are talking about here in anatomy and physiology. So again, if I pull up your canvas here, check in the schedule. Where'd it go? Okay, so you can see here in week 3, we are finishing up the chemical level of organization. We're in the cellular level of organization now as well. In my lab assignment for my in-person class, we're doing microscopy. In my online class, you're doing microscopy as well. In the next week here, we'll actually get ready for tissues, but primarily we'll be focusing here on chapters 2 and 3 exams. So next week will be the exam for chapters 2 and 3 that'll be taken on Thursday. And so again, as we have here week 2 and 3, next week's our test, and so in talking about chapters 2 and 3, we'll start with chapter 2. The big thing is chemistry of chapter 2. I broke it down into 2 sections. So that first section, as you can see, is called the basic chemistry review. So that's talking about some of the basic concepts related to chemistry, whether it's the elements that you'd find on the periodic table, the subatomic particles that make them up, the protons, the neutrons, and the electrons, and ultimately how those electrons interact to create chemical bonds and chemical reactions. And so the second part of that here is referring to the components associated with inorganic and organic compounds. So inorganic compounds, the biggest one being primarily water, and talking about water and its, take a little bit of space there, water and its special properties. So water is a polar covalent bond, and so because of that, there's a slight negative charge on the oxygen, a slight positive charge on the hydrogen, and that allows water some special properties. And then the organic compounds, those organic compounds, as you can see there, include proteins, nucleic acids, carbohydrates, and fats. So again, we've got chapter 2, and that's the big review of the week, and also going over here now chapter 3, cell biology. So let's try something here. I'm going to talk a little bit about cell biology and what the major concepts are associated with cell biology, but I'm going to do it a special way here this evening. I brought up my AI friend here, and so what I have is I wonder if I can change my view so you can see it a little bit better. Light theme. Okay, can I zoom in? No, I cannot zoom in. I think I'm going to go dark. Yeah, I'll stay dark. Okay, nonetheless. So let's get back into our exploration here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to upload the chapter. So we'll check. Let's go back to PO here. This is po.org, po.com. Let me remember what it is. Po.poe. So it's an AI generator, and it's a multiple.com. So po.com, as you can see, it's got a number of different, it utilizes a number of different bots here that have been created, and so this is a free version. What I'm going to do is I've got chapter 3 here. You can see the textbook is in PDF form. There it is, Chapter 3, Cell Biology. View the chapter of the text. So we'll give it a moment here, but again, what we're going to see is oh, PDF didn't work. All right, let's try something else here. Oh, well, let's try one more here. Let's try the outline. So again, we have the review. Now you can't really see it, but what we've got here is an overview of the cells. So cell theory is a big concept that starts in chapter 3, where we talk about the concept that cells are the smallest living things, right? So it's the smallest thing that can carry out all of the physiological functions that are necessary for life, and that life comes, right? The other cells come from the division or mitosis of other cells. And so cell theory is a big component when we really talk about the beginning of the chapter here. And then the next part, you can see the cell structure and function. So we talk about the cell membrane, the plasma membrane, a phospholipid bilayer that serves as a barrier and regulates the movement of substances. The cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is what contains the organelles and is divided into the cytosol itself, which is the cytosol itself, which is the fluid, and then the organelles, which are those structures that you should be familiar with, like your mitochondria, your rough endoplasmic reticulum, your membranous structures. Those are the ones that are much more numerous, and then your non-membranous structures, so cytoskeletal structures as well are associated with non-membranous. So all of the traditional organelles that we would think about, like your lysosomes, your mitochondria, they're all membranous. The structures like the proteins that build, that give shape to the cells, those are non-membranous. And then the big component here in chapter 3 is membrane dynamics. So let's do this here. I did that there, so let me copy it here for you in the best way I can. So the first is, give you another space there. The first is this overview of cell theory. Remember, that's the concept that we talked about related to cells being the smallest living structures, that cells develop from other cells, or cells come from the division of other cells. And then again, that is mitosis. Let's try this one more time. And there you have it, right? Cell theory, the concept that all living organisms are composed of cells, which arise from pre-existing cells, right? Cytology is the study of cells and their role in as the fundamental unit of life. Let's go back to that next slide. Good night. Try that again. Okay. The next part uh, that's associated with that is, let's see if I can't get it up now, the cell structure and function. So thinking about the components of a cell, and pretty much what we'll be talking about is that of a generic cell. So it'll be a generic cell with all of the generic components. But think about other cells like a muscle cell that might have a little bit more mitochondria. It has multiple nuclei. Why? Because it's always going to be building, right? We can build muscle, but also requires a lot of energy as well. So both of those attributes allow those muscles to have a little more of any given cellular structure. And so that's what we're looking at here with this next slide. You've got the components of a cell. So whether it's the cell structure and function, that's what we're talking about here. The cell components, whether it's the plasma membrane, which is that phospholipid membrane bilayer that acts as a barrier and regulates the movement of substances, or the cytoplasm, which contains the organelles and is divided into the cytosol, the organelles, and the organelles can either be membranous and non-membranous. Let's move on here to the next component. The membrane dynamics, so the different transport mechanisms, to being able to differentiate between passive and active transport processes and explain how substances can move across membranes. Right, membrane dynamics, these transport mechanisms. So passive transport mechanisms, whether it's diffusion, osmosis. Osmosis is diffusion of water. Active transport processes is the requires energy. Essentially, that is the reason why it is called active, is because it requires energy. And those active transport processes are going to be good to know, specifically one of those transport processes, which is the sodium potassium pump. Specifically, the sodium potassium pump is a big one to be familiar with. I'll just kind of put it right here. The sodium. And you can see that there. The next part here is the organelles and their function. So there are organelles that are non-membranous. Those include like the cytoskeletons type structures, centrioles, cilia, ribosomes. They're crucial for maintaining their cell shape and facilitating movement. And we can see that here. I'll make another one slide for us. And then the membranous organelles, as we've mentioned before, those things like the endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi apparatus, mitochondria, the lysosomes, and perioxysomes have each of their own specific roles associated with the cell. Right, organelles and their function. Membranous organelles such as the endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi apparatus, mitochondria, lysosomes, peroxisomes, each with specific roles in cellular metabolism and function. The nucleus and genetic information will be important as well, so we'll take a look at that here. So, as it relates to the nucleus, remember that the nucleus is the control center of the cell. It houses the DNA and regulates protein synthesis through transcription and translation processes. And then finally, cell division and cell cycle. So, and the cell life cycle. So, being familiar with the different stages of mitosis, the different stages of mitosis. There it is, the cell cycle and cell division. Detailed stages of interphase and mitosis explain how cells grow, replicate DNA, and ultimately divide, and discuss abnormal cell growth. That's metastasis or cancer is the term there. Apoptosis is the planned cell death. So after a cell has undergone all of its function, it will undergo a planned cell death. And again, as we talk about the abnormal cell growth, this idea of metastasis and cancer, the distinction between benign and malignant tumors. So again, there's chapters 2 and 3 for you. We're looking at chapters 2 and 3. Chapter 2, basic chemistry as it relates to the human anatomy and physiology. Chapter 3, the cellular structure and the basic structures of different cells here. And you guys will be doing labs associated with that here this week. But I think that's all the time I have for here today. Stay tuned. Next week, we'll start to get into some more of the tissues. So, next week, we're going to really get specific into the different types of tissues. So, a collection of cells is a tissue, and this is where we get specific into anatomy and physiology. There's only four basic types of tissues in the body. There's connective tissue, there's muscle tissue, there's epithelial tissue, which lines the inside and outside of my body, and then there is finally nervous tissue, right? The nervous system. So those four tissues are the what makes up all of the parts of the body, and so each of those combined, more than a couple of tissues together, will create an organ, like your muscle, like your bone, and ultimately become part of an organ system. But we'll save that here for the next week. Thanks again for joining me here in my announcements and review of Chapter 3. Thank you guys, and I look forward to seeing your responses throughout the rest of the week here.